What's the wildest thing your parents convinced you was true? My brother lied to Child Protective Services, CPS, about our home situation, ensuring my parents could continue to hurt me. So, I cut ties completely and never looked back. 5 years later, he's calling me in tears, claiming I'm the only family he has left. Growing up, my parents ingrained in us that privacy was wrong. My mom would literally search our rooms while we slept. If she found even a piece of homework I hadn't shown her, she'd wake me up and make me kneel on rice until morning. The rice would dig into my skin, leaving tiny indentations that lasted for hours. Sometimes my knees would bleed from the pressure, tiny red dots appearing on the white grains. The pain was sharp and constant, impossible to ignore no matter how I shifted my weight. But my dad was even worse. He made the rules. He decided how long we'd kneel, if we could lock the bathroom door, and even the clothes we wore, so he could see the work he did on us. If we broke the rules, his face would turn a particular shade of red when he was angry, veins bulging in his forehead as he shouted. The smell of his aftershave would fill my nostrils as he leaned in close to yell, making my stomach churn with anxiety. I absolutely hated both of them and their rules. I tried to rebel as much as possible. I'd hide small things under my mattress, notes from friends, a candy wrapper, anything that could be just mine. I'd whisper to myself in the bathroom mirror, practicing the feeling of having thoughts that belonged only to me. The constant surveillance made me feel like I was suffocating, like there wasn't enough air in the house for me to breathe. My brother, on the other hand, was completely on board. He followed every word they said religiously. Not only that, but he was also determined to make me follow the rules too. His room was directly across from mine, and I could often hear him moving around at night, probably organizing his perfectly displayed belongings that he never tried to hide. If he ever accidentally read one of my texts, he'd run to my parents and tell on me about how I was keeping secrets, then watch with a smirk as my parents hit me. The satisfaction in his eyes was unmistakable, like he was getting some kind of thrill from my suffering. He was also self-serving and selfish, volunteering random confessions at dinner and acting like he was superior. I got frustrated with my math homework today and thought about giving up, he'd announce proudly, as if admitting to some terrible sin. The hardwood dining chair would creak beneath me as I shifted uncomfortably, knowing what was coming next. Our parents praised him so much for being open, and over time, I guess it paid off for him because my parents started letting him do things they had never allowed before. All of a sudden, his curfew was pushed back by a few hours, his room stopped getting searched daily. He'd strut around the house with this new confidence, shooting me knowing looks whenever our parents weren't watching. But for me, the mistreatment intensified. If I came home from school and didn't tell my parents about every class in detail within the first few minutes, I'd get punished, severely. The sound of my dad's belt sliding through the loops of his pants became the most terrifying noise in my world. Often, I'd wince in pain in class when sitting down, lying to my teachers about why I was hurting. I fell during soccer practice, I'd say, or I bumped into the corner of a table. The fluorescent classroom lights seemed to highlight my discomfort, making me feel exposed even when no one was looking. Then things got even worse. My parents started allowing my brother to search my stuff too, and he absolutely loved it. The way his fingers would rifle through my belongings, quick and invasive, turning everything upside down. I caught him grinning while tossing out my belongings multiple times, justifying it by saying, I never told them about this or that. The sound of my drawers being yanked open would wake me sometimes, and I'd lie perfectly still, pretending to be asleep while he ransacked my few possessions. Other times he'd feel really mean and just make up a lie about a secret note he found or something. The carpet fibers would scratch against my face as I pressed my cheek to the floor, begging them to believe me that there was no note. When that happened, my parents would lock me out of my own room and make me sleep on the couch, but only after the beatings. The leather couch was cold and sticky against my skin, and the thin blanket they allowed me provided little comfort against the chill of the living room. I'd see my brother lingering in the hallway after my punishments, smirking like he was the king of the house. Sometimes he'd whisper things as he passed by, little comments meant only for my ears, "That's what happens to liars," or "You deserve worse." The hallway was always dimly lit, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for me like grasping fingers. What's really sad about all of this is that it didn't matter what I did. I tried getting all A's, my backpack would be heavy with textbooks as I studied late into the night, eyes burning from exhaustion. I'd clean the whole house every weekend, the smell of cleaning products would cling to my hands for days, my fingers raw from scrubbing. I'd offer to cook dinner for them, carefully measuring ingredients and following recipes exactly, terrified of making a mistake. But if I wasn't sharing every little detail about my life with them, they looked at me like I was less. The disappointment in their eyes cut deeper than any physical punishment. Eventually, they even started giving me the silent treatment. They'd all eat dinner together and leave me at the kitchen counter alone. The sound of their forks scraping against plates, their casual conversation and occasional laughter felt like a physical barrier between us. The kitchen counter was cold and hard, and my food always seemed to taste like nothing as I ate in isolation, just a few feet away from what looked like a normal, happy family. One night, after a particularly bad punishment from my parents, I was feeling particularly low. My whole body ached, and the loneliness felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock in the hallway and the occasional creak of settling floorboards. And that's how I made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought I could trust my brother. I was desperate for some kind of ally, so I told him how I felt. The words tumbled out of me in a hushed whisper as we stood in the darkened hallway, my voice breaking with emotion. For a moment, his face seemed to soften, and I felt a flicker of hope. Within an hour, my dad had me laying face down over his lap, getting the belt out. I remember holding the pillow in my mouth, biting it not to scream. The fabric tasted like dust and salt from previous tears. 1, 2, all the way up to 10. Each strike sent shockwaves of pain through my body, the leather making a sickening sound as it connected with my skin. I remember that being my breaking point. This whole time, I had truly believed my brother was just complying with them out of fear. But no, he really believed everything they were teaching us. I don't think I ever felt worse than I did that night. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain ever could. After that, I just stopped fighting. I threw away my journals, the pages filled with my thoughts and feelings disappeared into the trash, taking pieces of me with them. I deleted all my old texts and never messaged anyone unless I had to. The screen of my phone became as empty as I felt inside. If I was forced to confess something, I just made stuff up. I thought about cheating on a test, I'd say, or I lied about finishing my homework. The words felt hollow in my mouth, but they seemed to satisfy my parents' need for control. However, there was still that little glimmer of resilience within me, a tiny flame that refused to be extinguished completely. I started writing small notes to myself on scraps of paper, hiding them in the lining of my mattress or taped under my desk drawer. Just little reminders that I was still me, that I still existed beyond their control. Stay strong, this won't last forever, remember who you are. The act of writing these tiny affirmations felt like breathing after being underwater too long. And of course, that came back to bite me. My brother caught me writing a little note to myself, the one private thing I still did, and immediately sprinted to my parents. His footsteps pounded down the hallway like a countdown to my punishment. As expected, they absolutely lost it. My mom screamed that they were done, her voice reached that high-pitched tone that made my ears ring. My dad got the belt again, the leather made that familiar slithering sound as he pulled it from his pants. My flip phone was smashed against the wall, the plastic cracked and scattered across the floor in tiny shards. I wasn't allowed to eat for 3 days, my stomach cramped and growled, a constant reminder of my punishment. In the aftermath, they even started following me around the house so I couldn't be alone. The constant footsteps behind me, the feeling of eyes watching my every move, was maddening. They made me stand in the living room, confessing secrets 3 times per day, morning, afternoon, and evening. I'd stand on the scratchy carpet, legs trembling from exhaustion, reciting made-up transgressions while they sat on the couch, judging. And every time, my brother was right there, smirking proudly as if he was doing the right thing. The sunlight through the living room window would catch his face sometimes, highlighting the satisfaction in his expression. I remember he called me a liar during one of my confessions. The word hung in the air between us, sharp and accusatory. My parents didn't beat me too hard, but that one little statement was the straw that broke the camel's back. Something inside me finally snapped, like a rubber band stretched too far. I finally decided to leave. The decision settled in my chest like a stone, heavy but somehow comforting in its certainty. I walked into school the next day, and for the first time in my life, I told a teacher what was happening at home. The classroom was empty except for us, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, dust particles dancing in the beams. I was honest and broke down, the words poured out of me like water from a broken dam, years of pain and fear spilling onto the desk between us. She seemed absolutely horrified, her face paling as I spoke, and before I knew it, I was sitting in the counselor's office, waiting for my parents to arrive to discuss the matter. 20 minutes later, I heard them before I saw them. My mom's shrill voice echoed down the hallway, demanding to know what was going on. My brother was with them too, of course he was. I could hear his footsteps, slightly quicker than my parents', eager to be part of whatever was happening. The door swung open, and my mom rushed in first, her face a mask of worry that I knew was fake. The smell of her perfume filled the small office, cloying and overwhelming. She tried to hug me, but I flinched away, my body reacting before my mind could, shrinking back into the chair. The counselor noticed, I saw her eyes narrow slightly, making a mental note. My dad stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. His hands were in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, the picture of a concerned but composed parent. My brother lurked behind him, peering around with curious eyes. He was trying to look innocent, but I could see the calculation in his gaze. Miss Patel asked them to have a seat and explained that we needed to discuss some serious concerns. The chairs creaked as my parents sat down, all smiles and confusion. "What's this about?" my mom asked, her voice honey-sweet. My brother leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I couldn't look at any of them. Miss Patel began by telling them I had shared some very troubling information about punishment practices in our home that involved physical abuse. She spoke clearly and professionally, her clipboard resting on her lap. My mom's face transformed instantly, claiming it was ridiculous and that they would never hurt me. Her voice rose in pitch, indignant and shocked. "We love our children. We would never harm them." When I whispered about the rice, my voice barely audible even to my own ears, my dad jumped in, suggesting there had been a misunderstanding and that I had been having behavioral issues lately, making up stories for attention. His voice was calm and reasonable, the voice he used when talking to neighbors or teachers. "We're strict parents, yes, but we're not abusive," he insisted, shaking his head sadly. I spoke louder, telling them I had marks on my knees and back. My voice gained strength as I continued, fueled by the knowledge that someone was finally listening. Miss Patel confirmed the school nurse had documented these injuries. She flipped a page on her clipboard, reading from the nurse's report. My parents exchanged a quick glance before my dad leaned forward with that reasonable tone he used when talking to neighbors or teachers. "Kids get bruises all the time," he began, spreading his hands in a gesture of openness. "We're concerned about these stories." I interrupted him, mentioning I hadn't eaten in 3 days because I wrote a note to myself. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. The room went silent, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the ticking of the clock. My brother shifted uncomfortably, for once, he didn't look smug. He looked nervous. My mom claimed it was a complete lie and that we had dinner together just last night, looking to my brother for confirmation. Her eyes widened slightly, a silent command. He immediately backed her up, saying, "We did, and that mom had made lasagna." His voice was steady, practiced. They'd done this before, presenting a united front against me. I told Miss Patel about eating at the kitchen counter alone while they sat at the table. My hands twisted in my lap as I spoke, nails digging into my palms. They wouldn't talk to me. They acted like I wasn't even there. My dad's face hardened as he said this was getting out of hand and that they were taking me home now to sort out this misunderstanding as a family. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The word family sounded like a threat in his mouth. Miss Patel stood up and informed them that wouldn't be possible today, as she had already contacted Child Protective Services, who were sending someone over to speak with all of us. Her voice was firm, brooking no argument. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees, the air felt suddenly thick and difficult to breathe. My mom's fake smile vanished completely, her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes narrowing. My dad's jaw tightened in that way it did right before he reached for his belt. I instinctively pressed back further into my chair. He quietly insisted they were good parents who had done nothing wrong. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the anger simmering beneath. My brother pushed off from the wall, claiming I made stuff up all the time for attention, even lying about having a stomach ache the previous week to skip a math test. His words tumbled out quickly, desperate. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd never skipped a test in my life. Good grades were the only thing that sometimes kept me safe. The injustice of his lie made my chest ache. A knock at the door made everyone turn. The sound was sharp and official, cutting through the tension in the room. A woman in a navy blazer stepped in, introducing herself as Marissa Wilson from CPS. Her shoes clicked on the floor as she entered, notebook already in hand. Behind her was a police officer named Officer Torres. His uniform rustled slightly as he positioned himself near the door, badge catching the fluorescent light. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The blood rushed in my ears, nearly drowning out the voices around me. What followed was the most surreal hour of my life. My parents denied everything, painting a picture of a troubled teen making up stories for attention. They talked about how hard they tried, how much they sacrificed. The words flowed smoothly, well-rehearsed. My brother backed them up on everything, describing a perfect family life that had never existed. His hands gestured animatedly as he spoke, eyes wide with false sincerity. Miss Wilson asked to speak with me alone in a smaller office. I showed her my knees, still raw and scabbed from the rice. The skin was red and pitted, tiny indentations marking where the grains had dug in. I showed her the marks on my back from the belt, purple and yellow bruises in various stages of healing mapped out my punishment history. I told her about the confessions, the searches, the smashed phone, everything. The words poured out of me, and with each one, I felt a tiny bit lighter. When we returned, my parents were all smiles again, but their eyes burned with fury when they looked at me. I could feel the weight of their gaze, promising consequences. Ms. Wilson announced they would need to conduct a home visit and that for tonight, they believed it was in my best interest to stay with an emergency foster family while they investigated further. Her voice was matter-of-fact but kind. My dad stood up so fast his chair tipped over, absolutely refusing and insisting I was his child. The chair clattered against the floor, the sound echoing in the small office. "You can't take my child. This is outrageous." His face was turning that familiar shade of red. Officer Torres stepped forward, suggesting he cooperate fully as this was a temporary measure while the investigation proceeded. His hand rested casually near his belt, not threatening but present. "Sir, please lower your voice and have a seat." My mom started crying, big theatrical sobs, begging them not to take her baby and insisting they were good parents, looking to my brother for support. Tears streaked her makeup, but her eyes remained dry and calculating. He nodded vigorously, insisting they were the best parents and that this wasn't fair. His voice cracked with what sounded like genuine emotion, but I knew better. I sat frozen, unable to believe what was happening. The voices around me seemed to fade in and out, like a radio with poor reception. After years of pain and fear, someone was finally listening to me. Someone was doing something. The realization was almost too big to comprehend. Miss Wilson helped me gather my things from my locker. The metal door clanged as I opened it, the sound echoing down the empty hallway. I didn't have much, just some textbooks and a jacket. My parents weren't allowed to approach me, but I could feel their eyes burning into my back as I walked down the hallway. The linoleum floor squeaked under my shoes with each step, marking my path away from them. My brother called out to me once, but Officer Torres stepped between us. "Stay back, please," he said firmly. My brother's face twisted with frustration, a glimpse of his true nature showing through the mask of concern. That night, I stayed with a foster family named the Jacksons. They had a quiet house with a guest room that had a lock on the door. The room was simple but clean, with pale blue walls and a window that overlooked a small garden. Mrs. Jackson told me I could use it if I wanted to. "This is your space," she said gently. "No one will come in without your permission." I did. I locked the door and cried until I fell asleep. The pillow muffled my sobs, but they were tears of relief as much as pain. The next few days were a blur of interviews and doctor visits. CPS found the rice in our kitchen pantry. The bag was half empty, grain spilled in the corner of the cabinet where it was kept. They found the belt. The leather was worn in the middle, evidence of frequent use. They interviewed neighbors who admitted they'd heard yelling and crying from our house but never wanted to get involved in someone else's parenting. "We thought they were just strict," one neighbor said, looking ashamed. My parents fought the investigation every step of the way. They hired a lawyer named Mr. Brennan, who specialized in family cases. His suit was expensive, his briefcase polished leather. They told everyone who would listen that I was troubled, that I was lying, that I was tearing the family apart for attention. Their voices followed me everywhere, even when they weren't physically present. Worst of all, they started showing up everywhere. When I went to school, my mom would be parked across the street, her silver sedan would idle at the curb, windows tinted but not enough to hide her watching face. When I left the Jacksons' house with Mrs. Jackson to go to the store, my dad would somehow be there, watching from his car. The feeling of being watched made my skin crawl, the back of my neck prickling with awareness. My brother started sending messages to the few school friends I had, telling them I was mentally ill and making everything up. "She's always been like this," he'd tell them. "She makes up stories for attention." Some friends believed him. They started avoiding me in the hallways, whispering behind their hands as I passed. One afternoon, I spotted my brother following me between classes. The crowded hallway parted slightly as he moved through it, his eyes fixed on me. When I confronted him, he just smiled, that same smirk I'd seen 1,000 times before, and whispered, they would never believe me, that we were a good family and that I was the problem and always had been. His breath smelled like mint gum as he leaned in close, words meant only for me. I called CPS that day and told them about the stalking. Miss Wilson helped me file for a restraining order. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and echoing hallways. The judge granted it, but that didn't stop them. They just got more careful, staying just far enough away to avoid getting in trouble. The legal document provided little actual protection, just a false sense of security that crumbled a little more each time I spotted them watching me. 3 weeks after I first spoke up, the court made its decision. The courtroom was stuffy and formal, wooden benches hard beneath me. My parents' rights were temporarily suspended pending completion of parenting classes and therapy. I would remain in foster care for at least 6 months. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack, making me jump slightly. As we left the courthouse, I saw them standing by their car. The parking lot was hot asphalt, radiating heat in the afternoon sun. My mom was crying again, my dad's face was stone. My brother stared at me with a mixture of hatred and confusion that made my skin crawl. His eyes narrowed as he watched me walk away. My dad called out that this wasn't over, that families belonged together and that they would get me back. His voice carried across the parking lot, making heads turn. I didn't respond. For the first time in years, I didn't have to. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. Life with the Jacksons was strange at first. Their house was always quiet, no shouting or slamming doors. Mrs. Jackson, a kindergarten teacher with graying hair and gentle hands, always asked before entering my room, a soft knock followed by, "May I come in?" The question still startled me every time. Mr. Jackson, a quiet man who worked from home, never raised his voice above a conversational tone, even when he was frustrated. He spoke calmly and clearly. Their house had rules too, but they were simple things like putting dishes in the dishwasher and letting them know if I'd be late coming home from school. The rules were written on a cheerful notepad stuck to the refrigerator, not enforced with threats or punishment. No confessions, no searches, no beatings. The absence of fear was disorienting, like stepping off a moving walkway onto solid ground. The first week, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'd flinch when Mr. Jackson reached for something near me. The involuntary reaction would make him pause, his eyes sad but understanding. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, certain I heard someone searching through my things. The house creaked and settled in unfamiliar ways, each sound sending my heart racing. Mrs. Jackson noticed how I hoarded food in my room and told me gently that I was always welcome to anything in the kitchen, day or night. I didn't believe her at first. I continued to sneak granola bars and apples into my dresser drawer, hiding them under my clothes. She never searched, never commented when the fruit bowl emptied faster than it should have. Mrs. Jackson mentioned one evening as we cleared the dinner table together that they had a therapy appointment for me the next day with Dr. Rivera, who specialized in helping kids who'd been through difficult situations. The plates clinked softly as we stacked them by the sink. My stomach clenched automatically as I nodded stiffly, already rehearsing acceptable answers in my head, safe answers, the kind that wouldn't get me punished. Dr. Rivera wasn't what I expected. She had bright purple glasses and a small office filled with fidget toys and art supplies. Plants lined her windowsill, green and thriving. She didn't make me talk about my parents right away. Instead, we just drew pictures and played with kinetic sand. The sand was cool and smooth between my fingers, forming and reforming into shapes without effort. By our third session, words started spilling out of me like water from a broken dam. I told her things I'd never told anyone, not even Miss Patel or Miss Wilson. The small office felt safe somehow, a bubble outside of normal time and space. She explained that I was experiencing hypervigilance after I told her about jumping at small noises and checking the locks on my bedroom door multiple times each night. She said it was my brain's way of trying to keep me safe and that it made sense after what I'd been through. The validation felt like cool water on a burn. For so long, I'd been told my feelings were wrong, my perceptions were wrong, I was wrong. Having someone tell me my reactions made sense was almost too much to process. I cried in her office that day, tears of relief more than sadness. School was harder. The hallways seemed too loud, too crowded, too unpredictable. News travels fast in high school, and suddenly everyone knew something was going on with my family. Some people avoided me like trauma was contagious. They crossed to the other side of the hallway when they saw me coming. Others asked invasive questions that made my skin crawl. Did your dad really hit you? Why didn't you just run away? Their curiosity felt like another violation. A few were kind, especially my English teacher, Miss Hoffman, who let me eat lunch in her classroom when the cafeteria felt too overwhelming. The quiet room with its bookshelves and posters became a sanctuary. Take all the time you need, she'd say, grading papers at her desk while I ate my sandwich in silence. Then the notes started appearing in my locker. The metal door would swing open, and there it would be, folded paper sitting on top of my books. The first one simply read, liar. The word was written in all caps, pressed hard enough to leave indentations on the paper. I crumpled it up and threw it away, hands shaking. The trash can in the hallway was already overflowing, but I stuffed it down anyway. The next day, another appeared. They cry themselves to sleep because of you. I recognized my brother's handwriting immediately. The loops of his Y's and G's were distinctive, a pattern I'd seen on countless homework assignments and notes over the years. I reported the notes to Ms. Wilson, who contacted the school. They reviewed security footage but couldn't catch who was leaving them. My brother was too smart for that. He'd always been good at causing pain without getting caught. One afternoon, I was walking home from school when a car slowed beside me. The engine hummed quietly as it matched my pace. My mother was driving, my brother in the passenger seat. Her window slid down with an electric whir. Please come home, she called through the open window, her voice breaking as she begged me, promising they had changed. We miss you so much, she said, tears in her eyes. Please just talk to us. I kept walking, eyes forward, heart hammering in my chest. The sidewalk seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of me, each step taking enormous effort. My brother shouted that I was tearing the family apart and asked if that was what I wanted. His face was red with anger, the mask of concern completely gone. "You're destroying everything," he yelled, his voice cracking. I broke into a run, not stopping until I reached the Jacksons' house. My lungs burned, legs aching from the sprint. I burst through the door, gasping for breath, and told Mr. Jackson what happened. He immediately called Miss Wilson, who added the incident to her growing file and reminded my parents about the restraining order. "This is serious," she told them over the phone. "The next violation will have consequences." That night, I received dozens of text messages from unknown numbers. My phone buzzed constantly, lighting up with notification after notification. Some pretended to be concerned classmates, asking if the rumors were true. "Hey, is everything okay? People are saying crazy stuff about your family." Others were more direct, saying, "My parents were devastated and questioning how I could make up such horrible lies. Your mom cries every day because of you. How can you do this to your own family?" I knew my brother was behind it. He'd always been good at manipulating people, at creating a network of allies. The thought of him sitting somewhere, orchestrating this campaign against me, made me feel sick. I showed the messages to Mrs. Jackson, who helped me change my number the next day. The phone store was bright and sterile, salespeople moving efficiently to help us disconnect from the harassment. 2 months into my stay with the Jacksons, Miss Wilson stopped by with news that my parents had been attending their court-mandated parenting classes and therapy and were petitioning for supervised visitation. She sat at the kitchen table, manila folder open in front of her. My hands went cold as I asked if I had to see them. The thought of being in the same room with them again made my stomach clench. She firmly assured me that the judge had made it clear that any contact must be voluntary on my part and that if I wasn't ready, I didn't have to see them. Her voice was steady and certain. "This is about what's best for you, not them," she said, squeezing my hand briefly. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by guilt. The familiar voice in my head whispered that I was being selfish, that I should forgive them, that family was everything. Dr. Rivera assured me my feelings were normal, that healing wasn't linear and that I didn't owe my abusers anything, not even forgiveness. "Healing is your journey," she told me during our next session. "You get to decide what that looks like and how fast or slow it goes." A week later, I was studying in the school library when my brother sat down across from me. The chair scraped loudly against the floor as he pulled it out. Several students looked up, then quickly away. He said conversationally that I looked terrible while they were doing great and that the house was so peaceful without me causing problems. His voice was casual, as if we were discussing the weather. I gathered my books, preparing to leave to find a teacher to report him for violating the restraining order. The textbooks felt heavy in my arms, my fingers clumsy with anxiety. He continued in a low voice that they wouldn't believe me forever, that eventually everyone would see what he'd always seen, that I was the problem, making up stories for attention. His eyes were cold, calculating. When I told him to leave me alone, my voice steadier than I felt, he leaned forward and asked what I would do, tell on him again, saying he was just a concerned brother checking on his sibling and questioning who they would believe. His breath smelled like coffee as he leaned closer, invading my space. A library assistant approached our table, asking if everything was okay. Her sensible shoes squeaked.